there's a lot of focus on them at the moment of like building your brand as a thought leader. So building your brand personally. The CEO's brand is really important.
Yes.
What do you think in terms of like personal brand versus business brand? How do you rank those things as priorities? What's your thoughts on that?
That's a difficult question for me to answer because essentially when you have an ambassador or a person, let's say it might be the CEO of an organization, they are in themselves part of the brand. So the CEO themselves have to have their own personal brand, whether their personal brand is in alignment with the business brand or not. That's what you need to connect. I suppose it's challenging because for ourselves, I am a personal brand as a branding expert, but I'm also the creative director at Brand for Brands, which is also a brand within itself. For me, those two visions are intertwined, they're interrelated, so it's the same cause. Where personal branding is really starting to become sort of a buzzword or a buzz thing at the moment with thought leadership is what we're really saying is we're using a new label or a new title to say somebody who has a vision that is aligned with a cause, that is aligned with a purpose, has an image now, which we now call a personal brand, and that's what they are being known for. If we go back to your original question about niche business and niche service, they've taken that crack in that wall, that thought process in and around that, and that's what it is that they are endorsing. In this day and age where technology, outsourcing, and social media has totally changed the business landscape, we're not seeing really much differences between a personal brand and a business brand because we're seeing them as one and the same. I mean, if you think of Steve Jobs, you automatically think of Apple. And if you think of Apple, you automatically think of Steve Jobs. And there's many, many, many references like that. Where they were primarily very distinguishable in the past, they're no longer that. They're a marriage, they're a union, and they go hand in hand. So CEOs of organizations that don't want to promote their own personal brand really is going to have a knock-on effect, later on in their marketing, because people will start to question the authenticity and the integrity of what it is they're doing or they're producing because their own CEO isn't the brand ambassador. So the two are becoming very, very aligned and very intertwined. And we're entering into an age where a person is the brand and the brand is the person. They're no longer separate.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's like, I know, for instance, as well, like Steve Jobs and Apple, great example. I know, for instance, with Virgin, with Richard Branson. Richard Branson has like millions, billions. I don't know how many followers he has on LinkedIn, but it's like significantly more, like we're talking 10 times, 100 times more than the amount of followers that Virgin's LinkedIn page has, right? And I mean, it kind of makes sense because like we're humans, so we want to interact with a face. We want to interact with a human, right? But it
essentially people buy people.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. We're buying people. We're not buying the product. We're not buying the service. I mean, we are. That's what we're getting in exchange. But we're buying the person. We're buying their philosophy. We're buying their vision. We're buying what they believe.
So it's kind of like it's a question that comes up for me quite a lot from clients and maybe for you as well, where there's this fear of being too much of an ambassador because it's like, well, if I'm an ambassador for my brand and then I want to exit the business, what's going to happen then? Is the business still as valuable if I'm no longer there? What would you kind of say to that objection? What would be your advice?
I think what it comes down to is if that individual wants to exit that business or the brand, will that brand still be valuable? If that business as a brand, if that brand as the business continues to maintain its vision and continues the dialogue with its intended community or target audience, then the reality is no, they won't lose much market share. They might in the interim. However, what's really important is how that change is managed, how that exiting process is dealt with, how that brand and that individual communicate with their old target audience and then communicate with the new target audience. And essentially, most people expect that everything has a cycle. There's always a beginning and an ending, or there is a transition period. I mean, we've got many examples of, ambassadors of brands leading one organization and going to another or starting up, something on their own. But what it comes down to is, how does that individual and the brand jointly manage that conversation and that dialogue so people understand? And we're pretty forgiving. We understand that, some people move on and they want to do other things. Doesn't mean that we'll love them any less or that we won't follow them, but it really comes down to how they're going to manage that transition. Yeah. We expect that things will come to an end, or that there'll be something that will replace that product, that person, or that service. It's just within our nature now. We don't seem to have the stability or longevity of products as what we once used to. It's one of the reasons why a lot of companies rebrand as a strategy to stay ahead, because they think it's going to get them more market share, because that's what we expect. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily that we expect the change. What we expect, if there is a transition, that we are taken through that transition and we're not left in the dark, so it's not a surprise. That's what we expect.